20-year-old Shamima Begum could be heading back to Britain within weeks after a landmark ruling to allow her to fight the decision to remove her British citizenship.
Aged just 15, she left the UK to join Islamic State. So, should she be allowed back? Well, joining us now is Shamima Begum's lawyer, Tasnime Akunjee, who's praised the Court of Appeal's ruling. Also joining us is Macer Gifford, who fought against the Islamic State in Syria. Good morning to both of you. Macer, if I can start with you, what do you make of this? Do you think she should be given the opportunity to be able to come back? It's only fair that she has the right to challenge the removal of her citizenship, bearing in mind that, you know, as we were saying, she was only 15 when she took the decision to go over to Syria and be aligned with ISIS.
We must listen also to the local people. She's currently in a prison in Syria, and this argument really splits into two. There's a moral argument, there's a legal argument. The moral argument is that she joined the Islamic State. The Islamic State being a terrorist organization that's ripping Syria and Iraq to pieces. It's committed genocide against the Yazidi people. And what I hope people would remember is who are the victims here and who are the perpetrators? The real victims are the thousands of people, including thousands of sex slaves, Yazidi sex slaves, that are still missing. And it's not those that went across the world to join a terrorist group that's butchering innocent people.
Let's speak to her lawyer. Tasnime, the big question that people are saying that, look, she knew what she was doing at the time. She's made her bed. She should lie in it. But then the other argument is that she was 15 and she was groomed. You know, when you stack this up in court, have you got enough evidence to really suggest that this was a 15-year-old who was groomed and didn't really know what she was doing?
Sorry, I need to be clear first. I'm Shamima Begum's family's lawyer. Shamima Begum herself is separately represented. Sure. From the very off, the situation was clear from what we all saw back in 2015. She was a schoolgirl with a cohort of 3 other schoolgirls who all left from the same school at the age of 15 and 16 and went over under the noses of the security services in both the UK, Turkey, and joined a terrorist organisation. Now, that by definition was a groomed individual who was trafficked by the very definition of it. And we know that because at the time, the Chief of Police, Metropolitan Police, Bernard Hogan-Howe, and the head of counter-terrorism, which is Mark Rowley, both said in open parliament that these were girls who had gone over and that they would be treated as victims should they come back. So the evidence at the time, even by the police themselves, it was accepted what their status was.
Now, you're acting on behalf of her family. I mean, how can her family be sure? And I'm sure any mother would probably want to see her daughter come back home, of course. Why wouldn't she? But how can they be sure? And a lot of people's concern is that Shamima comes back, she may serve some kind of punishment, some sort of time, but could then actually still be quite a prominent person in terms of grooming others. For all we know, she may well become a bigger issue and a bigger threat to UK and people's freedom. How can her family be sure that she won't do that?
Well, no one can be sure, including her family, that that won't happen. But that is pure speculation. And what we deal with here is facts, is what is the person's status right now, what have they done right now, and then accuse them formally of those crimes. And people have talked about, and Macer's spoken quite correctly, that she had joined a terrorist organisation, albeit at the age of 15. Now, that being the case, that's a criminal offence, and a criminal accusation, should be levied at her, evidence brought, and then a jury of her peers listens to the evidence and then finds her guilty or innocent. Yeah, so that's how we deal with anyone, really, when we accuse them of crimes.
Macer, I mean, you know, no one's ever going to agree on this. We're not all going to agree on what the right thing to do with Shamima Begum is. And when we don't agree, there is a system in place called the legal system. It is there to execute justice. And surely the only solution here is to put Shamima Begum through the legal system. If you look at a recent example of Daniel Burke. Daniel Burke, similar to you, was out in Syria to fight with the Kurdish YPG militia against ISIS. But he was arrested and terror offences charges are placed on him. But now, recently, the CPS have dropped those charges. So that would have only have happened if he'd gone through the legal system. So surely the only solution to this is to put her through the courts.
Well, this is my issue, is I do not trust the British legal system to get this right. Just 1 in 10 jihadis that have come back from Syria over the past few years have found themselves in court. There are already hundreds of people walking the streets today. And that's how unjust the system is, that Daniel Burke, who is a former serviceman who fought for his country in Afghanistan, he fought against ISIS in Syria by joining our local partners on the ground. He was run through the courts, spent 7 months in Belmarsh prison, and actually, excuse me, he didn't even make it to court. All of this was while he was pre-trial. And he was only just released. My fear is that Shamima Begum will come back to the UK and get a slap on the wrist, and she'll be out within 2 years. The real victims, the Yazidi people, I've just written a book called Fighting Evil. And it goes into a huge amount of detail about the lives destroyed, about the communities ripped apart, the missing Yazidi girls. And it shows what Daniel and what myself were fighting for. And we mustn't forget the victims here. So there is another option. It's to actually work with local people on the ground in Syria and Iraq and talk to them about what they want to do with these prisoners. And if they want to put them through a judicial system, why can't they stand trial in Syria and Iraq where they committed their crimes?
Macer, how dangerous do you think Shamima is? Because, you know, initially a lot of people were talking about the fact that she said she had no regrets going to Syria to join IS. And then she said of her future, I'm not going to go back and provoke people to go to ISIS or anything. If anything, I'm going to encourage them not to go because it's not all it seems in their videos. I mean, what are your concerns about how dangerous you feel she is if she did come back?
Well, she was above the age of criminal responsibility. She was very young, but she was nearly 16. But let's not forget, she's 20 now. And I've got friends from school who were injured in Afghanistan when they were 18. She's a young woman now who is just as dangerous and fanatical as the men. The women and the men are being held in camps in Syria and are intensely dangerous. There is no evidence that after years, something like 5 years in the Islamic State, that she's any safer now than she was when she left. And she was her most unfiltered when she first came out of the so-called caliphate. She waited for it to be utterly annihilated. She could have had at any point asked to come back, made a public appeal to come back, asked for help, etc. But instead, she chose to stay until the Islamic State was militarily defeated. And then she even showed regret that she even left at that point. And she normalized their behavior, the decapitations, the heads in the bins she described, and everything else. It's only now that she's spoken to lawyers, she's spoken to her family, and she's realized that she faces a very real threat of staying in Syria and being punished in Syria. When instead,
Well,
if
I mean, surely it shouldn't. Macer, it shouldn't matter when she shows remorse. The fact that well, that's what you want these people to do, isn't it? If they are bad people, at some point you want them to become good people. I mean, what else do we want it to be? To carry on being an enemy? And we have to take her word. But the only way we will see actual evidence, and the only way we can make a real judgment, is putting her in front of, like Tasnime says, in front of a jury of 12 people, and that's what the system is there for.
Well, there's no reason why she shouldn't stand trial in Syria. At the end of the day, Syria is where all the evidence is. It's going to be almost impossible to interview all the witnesses, to interview all the people who were victims of the Islamic State. Bringing her to the UK under the current legislation will really mean that she'll be out within 1, possibly 2 years. There was this horrible sort of fact that a young Yazidi girl was on the bus in Germany and she bumped into one of the people that had captured her and abused her. And that's what we could see in Britain too. So let's not forget who the victims are.
Macer, I think lots of people will agree with you there, and I think that's a really valid point. We shouldn't forget about those victims, and it's horrific.